The gavel struck the wooden block with a sharp crack that echoed through the drafty auction barn. Folks flinched at the sound, but none more than Elra Vance. She stood near the back, clutching her bidder card like it was the last piece of her old life she still understood. She thought she had just bought a quiet gray mare for her daughter. A safe horse. A gentle one. But when the dust settled and the shouting stopped, she realized the truth. She hadn't bought a gray mare at all. She had bought the wrong horse. A horse everyone called the killer. The auction barn smelled of manure, wet hay, and worn-out hope. It sat along a lonely dirt road miles from the nearest town in the cold Wyoming territory, a place where ranchers came only when they were desperate to sell, or too broke to care. Elra didn't belong there. She was a young widow from Fort Wixon, a woman who had always lived a soft life with clean hands and clean books. But after her husband Mark died in a riding accident 2 years earlier, nothing felt clean anymore. Her daughter Sophie had been slipping deeper into silence since then. All she wanted was a horse of her own, something steady to hold on to. Elra had promised she would make it happen, even if money was tight. She studied the crumpled catalog in her hand. Lot 42, Betsy, a 20-year-old gray mare, slow, calm, safe, exactly what Sophie needed. Her friend Sarah had warned her not to look anyone in the eye at a kill auction. Kill buyers circled these barns like vultures, waiting to snatch up unwanted horses for slaughter. But Elra told herself she could manage. She only needed to raise her hand once. Inside the ring, horses were pushed through one after another. Thin ones, lame ones, ones with scars that told stories nobody wanted to hear. The auctioneer rattled out numbers so fast she could barely keep up. She flipped through pages, counting lots, trying to match the horses to the catalog. Then the gates opened, and a gray horse stepped into the ring. Her heart lifted. Betsy. Finally. 200. Who'll give me 2? The auctioneer barked. Elra raised her hand. 300? 4? She raised her card again. 500. Sold. Number 409. The gavel slammed. She had done it. Relief washed over her like warm water. She hurried to the payment table, ready to bring home Sophie's horse. But before she could finish signing the slip, a violent sound ripped through the barn. A scream so sharp it felt like it could split bone. Men shouted. Hooves pounded metal. Someone yelled for help. Elra turned. In the narrow chute leading to the holding pens, a massive dark bay stallion was rearing, striking sparks from the metal bars. He was skin and bone thin, wild-eyed, and covered in mud and dried blood. Even from across the barn, she felt something cold grip her spine. That's Lot 71, the clerk muttered. Meanest stallion we've seen in years. Should have gone on the truck days ago. Elra frowned. Lot 71? I didn't buy that horse. I bought the gray mare. The clerk froze, staring at the ledger. Then she slid the page toward Elra with trembling fingers. Honey, Lot 42 sold 10 minutes ago. You were in line. You bid on the horse behind the gray. That stallion. Lot 71. Elra's blood turned to ice. No, that's a mistake. No refunds, a deep voice growled behind her. Silas Thorne, the auctioneer, towered over her like a shadow. His eyes were cold and flat. You bid, you bought, he's yours. Get him out of here by sundown. But he's dangerous, Elra protested. Silas shrugged. Then, don't stand too close. Outside, the November wind cut through her coat. The stallion hammered at the chute behind her, shaking the entire structure. She stared at her empty trailer. She had spent all she had. She had no money for another horse. And she couldn't bring that monster home to her daughter. But then, in a brief pause between his frantic strikes, the stallion turned his head. Through the slats his dark eye met hers. It wasn't rage she saw. It was fear. It was the same hollow, wounded fear she had seen in her own mirror for 2 years. If she left him here, he would die today. She closed her eyes. Mark's face flickered in her memory. The promise she had made to Sophie weighed heavy on her chest. I can't leave him, she whispered. She called the only man she knew who handled rough stock. "Jim, I need help. And bring sedatives." It took 3 hours, 2 cowboys, ropes, and a mild dose of sleeping powder to get the stallion into her trailer. By the time they reached the small stable she rented on the outskirts of town, night had swallowed the plains. The barn owner, old Andrew Higgins, stepped out with a lantern, squinting at the beast stomping inside the trailer. "Elra, what in God's name did you bring here?" She could barely speak. "A mistake, just for tonight. I'll fix it in the morning." The stallion hit the stall door the moment they closed him inside. Teeth bared, muscles trembling, a creature made of fear and fire. "Keep Sophie away from him," Andrew warned. "Some horses just go bad." Elra sank onto a hay bale outside the stall, listening to the stallion pace through the dark. Thump, thump, thump. The barn walls shuddered with every step. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the shadows. She had no idea what she had just brought into her life, or what secrets lay hidden beneath that tangle of mud, blood, and matted mane. The sun rose slow and pale over the Wyoming plains, casting long bars of light through the cracks in the barn wall. Elra hadn't slept a minute. All night she listened to the stallion move like a storm trapped in a box. When dawn came, his pacing stopped for the first time. She stood, stretched her stiff legs, and stepped closer to the stall door. His dark shape stood in the far corner, ribs sharp as fence rails, coat dull and patchy from months of neglect. When she shifted her weight, he snapped his head toward her and pinned his ears flat. The warning was clear. She backed 3 steps away. Sophie came running into the barn, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mom, did you bring her home, the gray mare?" Elra's heart cracked. "Not exactly," she whispered. Sophie peeked around her and froze when she saw the stallion. "Mom, that's not a mare." "No," Elra said. There was a mix-up. Sophie stepped forward, curious despite her fear, but Elra grabbed her arm. "Don't go near him. He's not safe." Sophie nodded but didn't take her eyes off the stallion. For the next week, every attempt Elra made to care for him became a battle. If she tried entering the stall, he charged the door. When she tossed hay, he struck at the bars with his front hooves. If she walked past, his whole body tensed like a bowstring ready to snap. Old Andrew shook his head every morning. "You can't fix this one," he told her. Some horses lose their minds after too much pain. But Elra refused to give up. Something in that dark eye still haunted her, something that begged not for fear but for understanding. On the 6th day, Dr. Mason Field arrived. He was the only vet who would come on short notice, though he made his opinion clear the moment he stepped inside the barn. "Elra, this is not a rescue. This is a liability." "Just look at him," she pleaded. It took a rope, a chute, and a heavy dose of sedative just to get Mason close enough to check the horse. Once the drug settled into the stallion's blood, his trembling slowed. His head lowered. His wild eyes softened into something exhausted and broken. Mason ran his hands over the stallion's ribs. "Old fractures," he said. "He's been beaten hard." He checked the hooves. "Starved for months." He checked the gums. "He's older than he looks, maybe 12. Then his hand slid beneath the thick, matted mane. "Hold on," Mason said. "Hand me the clippers." "What is it?" Elra asked. "Something's here." He shaved away a patch of tangled hair and grime. Slowly, an icy mark revealed itself under the blade. A white symbol burned into the skin long ago. A freeze brand. Mason squinted. "This isn't local, this is specialized. Looks like a crown with a sword. And 3 numbers. Elra leaned in. "What does it mean?" Mason stepped back, troubled. "Brands like this don't belong on ranch horses. Someone put time and money into this animal. Someone trained him once." That night, long after Mason had gone, Elra sat at her kitchen table, staring at a picture of the brand glowing on her laptop screen. She typed every search she could imagine. Nothing matched. Out of desperation, she posted the image on a small horse genealogy forum. She didn't expect much. But at sunrise, her inbox was full. One message stood out. The subject read, Call me immediately. Do not tell anyone you have this horse." Her heart pounded as she opened it. The letter was short but shook her to her bones. "If the brand is real, you are in danger. That brand belongs to a royal stud in a far-off land. But the horse with that mark, the stallion numbered 0007, was called Obsidian King. And Obsidian King died 6 years ago in a barn fire in Kentucky." Elra looked out the window toward the barn. The stallion paced in the shadows, carved from smoke and fear. A horse dead 6 years ago. A horse worth a fortune. A horse hidden under filth, lost in the wrong world. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number left in the message. The man who answered spoke with a sharp British tone. "Tell me what he looks like," he said. She described the stallion's markings, his coat, his build, the swirl on his chest. On the other end, the man choked back a sound like a broken sob. "That's him," he whispered. "That's my king." Elra felt her knees weaken. "What do I do?" she asked. "Keep him hidden," the man said. "No one must know you have him. The people who lost this horse didn't lose him by accident." Elra stared at the barn as fear crept into her heartbeat. King's shadow moved through the wooden slats like a ghost returned to life. "I'll come to you," the man said. "Do not trust anyone else." "Who are you?" Elra whispered. "My name is Julian Cross. I trained him. And if he is alive, the whole truth will follow him home." Before she could answer, she heard something outside. Gravel crunching under tires. She peeked out the window. A black wagon she didn't recognize rolled to a stop in front of the barn. 2 men stepped out. Not ranchers. Not neighbors. Hard men with hard faces. They scanned the property with cold, slow eyes. Elra's breath caught in her throat. They were not lost. They were hunting. And they knew exactly what they came for. The black wagon sat idle in the cold morning light, its dark paint glinting like a warning. 2 strangers stepped out, their boots sinking into the frosted dirt. Their long coats hid their hands, but Elra knew enough about danger to recognize trouble even from a window. She backed away from the curtain, her heart thudding like hooves on hard ground. Julian's voice crackled through the telegraph speaker she held. "Elra? What's happening?" "There are men outside," she whispered. 2 of them. They're walking toward the barn." "Listen to me," Julian said, his tone sharp. "Do not let them see the stallion. If they get a look at him, they'll do whatever it takes to silence the truth. Stall them until I arrive." "Stall them how?" she hissed. But he had already hung up. Elra grabbed her coat and rushed out the front door just as the taller man tipped his hat with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, ma'am," he said smoothly. "Fine piece of land you've got here. We're looking for a horse that was mistakenly sold at the Cheyenne livestock auction." "I don't know what you mean," Elra said, blocking the path to the barn. The man behind him shifted his weight. Even from a distance, she saw the shape beneath his coat, a gun. Her mouth went dry. "We'd like to look around," the man said. "No," she answered firmly. "You have no right." "Ma'am," he continued, "my employer says a very valuable stallion might have ended up here by mistake. We're offering you good money to help us return him. $50,000. Elra shook her head. "I don't have your horse." The smile disappeared. "We know he's here." The second man pushed past her. "Stop!" she shouted, but he kept walking. The moment he reached the barn doors, the world exploded into motion. The stallion burst through the side of the barn in a shower of splintered wood, a massive dark shape cutting through sunlight like a wild force awakened from deep sleep. Julian was on his back, clinging to the thick mane, guiding the horse with only a rope halter. King reared high, hooves flashing above the heads of the intruders. The men dove into the dirt to avoid being crushed. "Get in the wagon!" Julian shouted. Sophie ran from the house. Elra grabbed her and shoved her into the back seat of their buckboard wagon, as Julian pulled King around in a tight circle. The stallion moved like he had been reborn, each stride strong and full of fire. They took off down the narrow trail behind the property, the wagon wheels bouncing over frozen ground. One look behind them told Elra the worst. The black wagon was following. "They're gaining!" Sophie cried. "Hold on," Elra said, gripping the reins with white knuckles. "I know these back roads." She steered off the main path and into the thick cottonwood forest. Branches slapped the sides of the wagon. King stayed close, running beside them, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat. Even wounded and starved, he outran the chasing wagon with the heart of a warrior. But they couldn't outrun their fuel. The wagon horses were slowing. The black wagon was almost upon them. Then, salvation. A small cabin appeared in the clearing, the old hunting shack Mark had once used years ago. Elra jerked the reins, swinging them into the clearing. They stopped beside the cabin as Julian pulled King close, dismounting fast. They leapt inside the cabin, slamming the door behind them. "Bar it!" Julian shouted. Elra shoved an old oak beam into place. The cabin trembled as the men outside slammed against the door. "We can't fight them!" Elra gasped. "We're not fighting," Julian said, looking at King. "He is." The stallion stood in the center of the small cabin, sides heaving, nostrils flared. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. They heard boots crunching in the snow outside. Then the door cracked open an inch as the men forced it against the beam, a pistol barrel shoved through. Julian whistled. King reacted instantly. He lunged with a powerful leap, kicking out behind him with a force that rattled the entire cabin. His iron-shod hooves struck the door and the man behind it. The gun clattered onto the floor as the man crumpled in the snow outside. Elra grabbed Sophie. "Out the back!" They ran into the freezing night, stumbling through snow as King and Julian followed. But as they reached the ridge beyond the cabin, they heard the unmistakable sound of more riders approaching. Reinforcements. They were surrounded. Cold wind whipped through the canyon as the leader of the group stepped forward, a broad-shouldered man with a fine coat and a rifle. His voice carried through the night air. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "you have something that belongs to me." Elra felt her blood freeze. It was Senator Sterling Vance. No relation to her, but a man with power far beyond her reach. He lifted the rifle toward King. "Nobody will miss a dead horse," he said. "Don't," Elra whispered. But it wasn't her voice that saved them. It was Sophie's. The girl ran in front of the stallion, arms spread wide. "Don't hurt him." Sterling hesitated. And in that single heartbeat, a bright spotlight tore across the ridge. The wind roared as a federal airship swept overhead, lanterns blazing. "This is the U.S. Marshal Service," a voice boomed from above. "Drop your weapon!" Sterling cursed and threw the rifle down, but it was too late. Deputies on horseback charged into the clearing, surrounding his men. In moments, the senator was on his knees, hands behind his head. Julian let out a breath that shook his whole body. Elra wrapped Sophie in her arms as King lowered his head, nudging the girl gently, as if to assure her he was safe. In the days that followed, everything changed. The marshals took Sterling away in irons. Witnesses from the auction and local ranchers came forward. Julian provided proof of King's identity, and Elra, with her training as an accountant, uncovered the tangled money trail that tied the senator to theft, fraud, and cruelty. The truth came out. The fire years ago was no accident. Obsidian King hadn't died. He had been stolen, hidden, thrown away. Months later, when the trial was done and the land was safe, Elra stood on a new porch overlooking the rolling hills of her own ranch. The Phoenix Sanctuary, a place for the forgotten, a place for second chances. In the pasture below, King ran free. No ropes, no chains, no fear. Sophie stood beside him, reading aloud as he grazed. The sight brought tears to Elra's eyes. Julian stepped beside her. "You know," he said, "folks still ask me how you ended up with such a horse." Elra smiled. "I tell them I didn't choose him. The wrong horse just turned out to be the right one." Down in the field, King lifted his head toward the wind and let out a long, ringing call that echoed across the Wyoming plains. A sound of freedom. A sound of fate. A sound that would be told for generations.